Good evening. This is Classical Theater, and I'm your host, Kevin the Chicken. Tonight, we begin part 2 of our series, Every Spell Put on Darrin. Before we get started, I want to apologize for misspelling Darrin's name in the first episode. I could have sworn it was E-N, not I-N. Maybe this is the Mandela effect. Anyway, apologies. Let's move on. Another correction from last week is in Season 1, Episode 11, after Janine put a love spell on Darrin, Samantha appeared to put a stop to everything. Now, I counted the love spell, but I didn't count Samantha's time stop spell. So I'm adding that into Samantha's total. Season 2 starts off with Aunt Clara accidentally turning Darrin into a chimpanzee. Now this is the kind of episode I remember watching as a kid. There's one witch, she casts one spell, and hilarity ensues. Now contrast this to the last episode, Cousin Edgar, where Edgar literally follows Darrin around just to fuck with him. Or the episode where a supermodel witch spends several days trying to seduce Darrin. Here there's just one spell, bam, hilarity. In the end, Clara accidentally turns Darrin into a seal, but then Samantha quickly turns him back to normal. Now in this episode, Samantha finds out that she's pregnant, and Darrin worries that the baby might be part witch. But if I was him, I'd be worried that the baby might be part chimpanzee. In the very next episode, Endora temporarily gives Darrin all the symptoms of pregnancy, like getting very emotional and eating a lot of pickles. His boobs didn't get any bigger, but at one point he says,
I'll have to have my pants let out.
It would have been funnier if he'd said, I'm going to have to let all my suits out. Now this is another one where there's just that one spell and it drives the plot of the entire episode. Episode 5 is the first episode with Arthur, and he introduces himself to Darrin by cursing the cork in his wine bottle. Is that a joke people used to play on each other? I've never heard of it. He also gets Darrin's foot stuck in a trash can, and when Darrin is giving a presentation to a door company, he locks the door that Darrin's using for a demonstration. Endora also gives Darrin another weird haircut. Now Arthur is Endora's brother, and he's the only uncle, aunt, or cousin whose relationship we understand. So far we've seen Aunt Clara, Cousin Edgar, and we've heard about cousins Miranda and Mario. And in a few more episodes we'll meet cousin Serena, but we don't know how any of them relate to Samantha's immediate family. Arthur's the only one. Episode 6 is the first time we see Samantha get sick. Now when Samantha gets sick, hilarity always ensues. For some reason nobody calls a doctor, even though Samantha says she needs one.
I think we need a specialist.
A witch doctor.
They just take medical advice from Aunt Clara, who needs an ostrich feather for her spell, which Darrin steals off a woman's hat and gets arrested and then teleported in and out of jail, once by Clara and then once by Samantha. Now, here's a new one, and for a couple of reasons. In episode 7, Samantha has an argument with Darrin, slams down the phone, and then does this weird thing where she turns around and looks at the phone and then storms off. Now when Darrin tries to call her right back, his phone is stuck together. And it turns out Endora is in his office with him, and she keeps casting little annoying spells on him, like slamming his hand in his briefcase when he gets ready to leave, and making his feet stick to the floor when he tries to walk away. So anyway, here's the part I don't get. When Samantha stopped and looked at the phone, did she put the spell on Darrin's phone so that he couldn't call her back? Or did Endora put the spell on the phone because she was in the room with him? We didn't see either one of them do it. No one waved their hand or made that twinkly sound. Both of them had reason to do it, and Endora was casting spells just like that to annoy him. On the other hand, if it was Samantha, this will be the first time that she ever put a spell on him out of anger, or a spell that was meant to annoy him. Later on, Endora shows up as a trick-or-treater and puts a hex on him to turn him into a werewolf. What's weird is that she was mad at him because she thought he was being insensitive, and being a werewolf has nothing at all to do with what she was mad at him for. Now, the little girl playing Endora is Marcia from the Brady Bunch, who appeared in a dream sequence in episode 12 of season 1, playing Darrin and Samantha's imaginary daughter, who coincidentally also was named Endora in the dream, Eventually, Endora turns Darrin back to normal, but then he annoys her immediately and she turns him back into a werewolf. But by the time he gets downstairs to his dinner guests, he's back to normal again, so this is the first time where a spell was put on Darrin, but we didn't see it. It happened off screen. Now, before I talked about how the best episodes are one witch casting one spell and then just hilarity for the rest of the episode. Well, episode 8 is not that, okay? It starts off with Clara giving Darrin a new suit. And then the pants disappear, so he's standing around with no pants on. And while he's out in public, and she spends the rest of the episode zapping him in and out of different outfits. He goes out of his clothes, into someone else's clothes, back out of his clothes, into a costume, out of the costume, and then into a suit of armor, and back out. When Sam idly wonders at the beginning of episode 10 what Darrin looked like when he was a kid, she wonders out loud in front of her mom. And Endora, of course, says there's only one way to find out, and changes him into a 10-year-old kid from Lost in Space. Now, you think Samantha would know better than to say something like that in front of her mom. Anyway, Endora removes the spell off screen, and Darrin goes to work. Then, while she's talking to Samantha in the kitchen, for no reason at all, she just zaps him back into a 10-year-old body. Samantha removes the spell from him over the phone, even though as recently as 3 episodes ago, when Darrin was a werewolf, Samantha said,
"If Mother put the curse on, I can't take it off."
Now, the client they were working with wanted to get a kid's perspective for his ad campaign or whatever. And Samantha spent the rest of the episode zapping him into a 10-year-old and then back into an adult. And the last time she even did it off screen, he would walk into a room as a kid and come back out as an adult. At the beginning of episode 12, Samantha agrees to babysit an adolescent warlock for the weekend. And she decides it's a good idea to not tell Darrin that the kid is a warlock. And she also doesn't tell the kid to act normal and not use his powers around Darrin. So Darrin gets beamed twice by magic softballs and then electrocuted. In episode 14, Endora gives Darrin a statue that makes him tell the truth every time he's within like 3 feet of it. So I'm counting each time it affects him. The first time, it seems not just to make him tell the truth, but start perving on his secretary.
That sure is a tight dress you're wearing.
Then he tells the truth to Larry, and then a client, and then Samantha, and then to a whole dinner party full of people. And at the end of the episode, Endora dumps a bowl of cereal on his head. Now we're up to episode 18, which is not only the debut of Tabitha, but also Samantha's cousin Serena. Now Endora offers to turn Tabitha into a grown-up so that they can see what she'll look like. But Darrin, of course, says no. Then later when he meets Serena, that's what he thinks she is. He thinks that she's the magically aged-up Tabitha. But Serena thinks Darrin is just perving on her, so she zaps him back to the hospital with a pacifier in his mouth. Later, Endora zaps Darrin back to the hospital as well, wearing a fake native costume for whatever reason, I don't know. Now this one's another mystery. At the beginning of episode 21, Darrin gets in a bar fight, and Samantha twitches her nose and the guy is knocked out. It turns out the guy's a boxer who just got knocked out by a nobody in a bar, so all kinds of hilarity ensues. In the end, they meet publicly to kind of hash things out, and of course they get in another fight, and then he gets knocked out again. The mystery, for me, even having watched it several times, is I can't tell whether the magic is in Darrin's punch or if Samantha punched him herself with magic. Both times you can see Darrin starting to take a poke at the guy, but both times you can see him getting knocked out without anything hitting his face. The second time, at the end of the episode, you can clearly see Darrin punching the guy. So I'm going to count the second one, but not the first one. In episode 23, Endora gives Darrin 3 wishes without telling him, and for some reason she has a pretty elaborate incantation to cast this spell.
Stars of lightning, sons of fire, hearken to the heart's desire. Set your potent power free, and grant this mortal wishes free.
Anyway, Darrin's first wish is for the elevator to hurry up.
I wish that elevator to hurry up.
Then he pervs on a young woman in the lobby. And then he wishes to be Larry Tate for a day, which drives the plot of the rest of the episode. In episode 26, Endora briefly gives Darrin a baby voice.
Forgiven me, one must say that's
Very sweet of her.
Now, I'm not going to play any more audio than that, or I'll get a copyright strike. But if you listen close in this episode, all the baby voices are done by the same voice actor who did Rocky the Flying Squirrel. Darrin quits his job in episode 28, and he goes for an interview with another agency. Now, Samantha, who wants Darrin to make up with Larry Tate and go back to his old job, puts a spell on him to make him act like a baby and blow the interview. It seems like a weird thing for her to do if she didn't want him to know that she'd done it. I mean, she could have just put a spell on the guy who's interviewing Darrin and make him hate him. At the beginning of episode 33, as Darrin is walking to his front door, Endora zaps him into farmer's clothes and then into a suit of armor. Samantha zaps him back to normal, but Darrin doesn't seem to even notice either way. Now, the spell that really drives the plot of this episode is that Endora splits Darrin into 2, one that's all business and one that's all fun. The only real lesson of this is that one, the Darrin who's all business isn't too far off from what Darrin normally is, as we always see him put business before family, always. And 2, neither of these Darrins is a good husband or father, in this episode at least. Anyway, at one point in this episode, Samantha time reverses Darrin going off a diving board. Darrin adopts a dog who's secretly a warlock, played by Richard Dreyfuss in episode 34. Technically, this isn't magic used on Darrin, but it is magic used to trick him. And in the very last episode of season 2, to prove a point, Endora sends Samantha and Darrin back to the past. Twice. I don't think they're actually in the past because nothing they do affects their present when they return. But in addition to this one spell, Endora also time freezes Darrin one time, zaps him out of the room 3 different times, and then finally just stuns him. So anyway, that brings us to the end of season 2. I wanted to share with you a couple of charts I made. This one here is comparing the number of times magic was used on Darrin in season 2 versus season 1. And you can see there's a more than 50% increase to 61 times versus just the 40 times in season 1. And over 25% of season 1 was just from that one single episode with Cousin Edgar. And here I broke down the spells used on Darrin into some pretty broad categories, like appearance, where he's been given a weird haircut or a big nose, clothing, emotional spells that change the way he feels about things. Like, we haven't seen a lot of these yet, but later on there'll be some episodes where And Dora makes him jealous or greedy or whatever. But anyway, there was that one love spell put on him so far. The two big categories are these two, physical assault / manipulation and prank / annoyance. This is the kind of stuff people remember when they think about this show, like having cereal dumped on his head, being shocked, having his hands stuck in things, crackers thrown at his face, the bottle of wine thing that Arthur did, or having the door locked or his shoelaces tied together, just things like that. And the last two significant categories here are probably being teleported places and being turned into things. Anyway, that's the end of season 2. Please like, subscribe, leave a comment, and we'll see you next time on Every Spell Put on Darrin.